Tom Goslowski, Goss, and Wolf here, 104.5 The Team and 104.5theteam.com. And joining us on the phone lines, he spent over a decade in Major League Baseball. He was an All-Star, a Golden Glove winner, and a World Series champion. He writes about that magical 1986 season in his book, Game 7, 1986, Failure and Triumph in the Biggest Game of My Life, Ron Darling. Ron joins us now. And Ron, I was reading the book over the July 4th weekend. It's very good. But when people ask you about Game 7, 1986, what's that first emotion that comes to you?
Well, I think because the book was so cathartic for me, I don't have as much emotion as I used to have before. But, you know, for most athletes who write a book, you usually write about some of your greater moments or some good times. And I chose a little different path here. In Game 7 for a starting pitcher is the Mount Everest. You know, we all want a chance to do that and to do well. And, I did not pitch well, but the Mets won. So that was the most important thing. But when people come up to me now, I don't even think they remember that I pitched Game 7. All they know is that the Mets won Game 7. And a lot of them think that the series ended after Game 6. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to write about the game.
You know, I have to tell you, even though Goss, who's very young, read the book, I actually I lived that year, and the Mets were my team. And I get mocked for that, by the way, because, now I'm more of a Yankee fan, and of course you can't be both. And I was like, well, you can't be both. And I was, the Mets with you on it, and, all the great players from that year are just really part of my childhood. In the book, it's people will ask you about Game 7, and you've already explained what your situation was there. What was that the highlight of your major league career? That moment?
Well, I don't know if it was the highlight. It definitely, as a team, it's the highlight. I always say that the highlight of my career was the first game I ever started. My parents in the stands. There's nothing like that original feeling that it takes kind of a village of people to help you make the major leagues, and when you do. And to see a lot of those people there, brothers, family, mom and dad, I always go back to that moment because it still resonates with me.
The parts of the book that Goz was telling me, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm going to, that he really enjoyed was the mental part of being a pitcher. Do you think it was was it that big of a game thing for you, the mental game?
Yeah, I think, I grew up as an infielder, so I didn't really pitch till I got to college. So I wasn't fully formed by the time I got to the major league. So, I had to use not only whatever physical gifts I had, but also whatever mental gifts I had to try to outsmart the opponent. In this book, though, because of the rain out after Game 6, I think, and this is on me, I think there was some paralysis by analysis on my part by just trying to think too much about it. And the second reason that I didn't last long in that game was a talented Boston Red Sox team with a veteran lineup that really they were the big reason why I didn't last any longer. And but it was I think the great thing about pitching is that occasionally you get to a point where your physical gifts match your ability to think your way around the game. And for the real great players, that time will last 5, 6, 7, 10 years. For some others, like myself, it's a 2 or 3 year kind of window you have, but there's nothing more fun than trying to match wits with the hitters.
Former Major League All-Star Ron Darling joins us here on the phone lines, 104.5 The Team and 104.5theteam.com. And make sure to check out his book. I got a chance to read it over the July 4th weekend. It's Game 7, 1986, Failure and Triumph of the Biggest Game of My Life. And Ron, overall, you look at this game, it's exciting. You look at this book, it's a great read. But I know when you're working on books and authors have time, they go into it and they think, boy, if I just had a chance to put this story in, I would have loved it even more. Oh, I left out that detail. Is there something in this book you wish you would have still been able to get in that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's you put these books together. And there's so much that has happened. I've been on the planet for 55 years now that you wish you could have used. I wish I could have done a better job of trying to set up kind of what New York was like, give the reader a better feel for what New York City was like, what the fan base was like following those Mets for those years. I didn't do a great job of that, and I wish I'd done a better job because it was a special time in New York City, a time that's gone, and it would have been nice to capture that.
Yeah, I remember that time very well. And, it was as a Met fan during that period of time, I was always being mocked by Yankee fans. I mean, you got if you're a Met fan from way back, you got to remember the beginning. How mocked you were as a Met fan. It was, we were second-class citizens back in those days.
Well, yeah, when you lose 120 games your first year,
right.
And the team on the other side of the street has, at that time, 24, 25 world championships. The thing about New York, which is great, is that both fan bases are a little different. The Yankee fan base, of course, have had probably maybe the greatest team in sports history, and I'm talking about the entire world, to root for such a long time. And the Mets team has such a different history. It's a history of two teams leaving for California, one team being put in the National League, the Mets. They're in their third different ballpark. Lots of losses early, only a couple of championships. But, you have to be a diehard to be a Mets fan because occasionally you are dying hard. But the people that stay with the ball club are great fans, and I think New York is one of the few towns that can have two different kind of ball clubs that still play the same sport.
Former New York Mets pitcher Ron Darling joins us here on the phone lines, 104.5 The Team and 104.5theteam.com. And Ron, you touched on how important and how great a feeling it was the 1986 World Series winning it, but it seems like it's one of those iconic moments in baseball. The ball going through Bill Buckner's legs in Game 6. How close is the team right now, the 1986 team, 30 years later? And do you guys have a relationship at all with Bill Buckner or any guys from that Boston Red Sox team from 1986?
Well, Rich Gedman, who played on the Red Sox team, I played schoolboy baseball against him in Massachusetts. Their team kind of got together this year earlier in the season. We just had the 30-year anniversary at Citi Field. So you really kind of hang out with your own guys. But I know that, and I know this for a fact. If we were to see those guys, Wade Boggs and Bill Buckner and Dwight Evans, it would be a handshake and an acknowledgement that both teams are very talented. And save for a couple of bounces that went the Mets' way, it could be the Red Sox that are celebrating the 30th anniversary. We know how close that could have been. So, mad respect for the Boston Red Sox team that year.
Well, let's fast forward now. In 2016, the New York Mets, they have great pitchers. Matt Harvey, Steven Matz, Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard. Do any of these guys in the rotation remind you of maybe Ron Darling?
Well, that's interesting. Maybe a deGrom, but much better hair. I think that I think I was a little bit like deGrom. I think he has better stuff than I had. But we're both good athletes. Played shortstop in college, that kind of stuff. So maybe he reminds me the most of what I tried to do in my day. But it was different. In '86, we had unbelievable strength through our variety of pitchers. You had Bob Ojeda, who changed speed, Sid Fernandez, the lefty who would strike out a lot of people, Dwight Gooden, of course, one of the best of all time. And this team has a little variety, but they're all power pitchers. I really think it's the greatest putting together the greatest right-handers and left-handers I've seen in some time, with Matz and Harvey, and Wheeler's not even back yet, and Syndergaard and deGrom. It's as good as I've ever seen.
Now, Ron, we asked this of all great athletes. In your career as a Met, there's got to be a really funny or odd story of something that happened that you retell. Can you give us that story?
Well, I think one of the great personal stories I ever had is I was pitching Game 4 in Fenway Park. I'm from Massachusetts. I grew up a Red Sox fan, and I went out to warm up, and I could not throw a strike. I was bouncing the curveballs. Fastballs were sailing over the catcher's head. And as I was walking into across the field to the dugout from Fenway Park, which the bullpens were in right field, I didn't feel that confident, and I got there a little late, and they started the national anthem, so I had to stop with my pitching coach, and I heard a little hey, and I looked over, and I had forgotten that my dad, who was with the National Guard, Air National Guard, was holding the flag that day in right center field. So I kind of stood next to him, listened to the national anthem, and all the anxiety and worries I had going into the game disappeared because he's the guy that taught me how to play, and it was just such a calming effect. And I mean, it's just unbelievable that would happen at that moment. Is something I'll never forget.
It's an amazing story, and there's a ton of amazing stories in the book. Game 7, 1986, Failure and Triumph in the Biggest Game of My Life, now available online. Ron Darling, former Major League Baseball All-Star, Golden Glove winner. Do yourself a favor. Go out, whether you're a Mets fan, Red Sox, Yankees, whoever you may be. If you are a sports fan, go out and try to find this book. I got a chance to read it over the July 4th weekend. It is outstanding. Ron, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it, and let's stay in touch for the future.
Thanks, guys. Had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.